God did not repeat that sign by accident. The number you keep seeing, the song that appears at the exact moment you're breaking down, the strange pull towards someone you haven't even met, yet it is happening because your twin flame path is no longer far away. And there's something even more urgent you need to understand. The spiritual attacks became stronger only because your union became closer. That sudden isolation, the betrayal from people you trusted, the feeling that everyone misunderstood your heart, none of it was random. While you were crying over what was falling apart, heaven was removing every false connection that could not follow you into your next season. Why do you think the same sign keeps chasing you? Because your soul ignored it the first time, then doubted it the second time. But now God is making it impossible for you to escape the truth. Someone connected to your destiny is already feeling your energy. And the moment you stop chasing the old cycle, the path between you and your twin flame will open faster than you expect. This is not coincidence anymore. This is alignment. Do not ignore the sign this time. If the same number keeps appearing in front of you, if the same message keeps finding you at your weakest moments, if you suddenly feel emotional for no reason in the middle of the night, this is not random anymore. God is trying to get your attention before something life-changing happens on your twin flame path. There is a reason your spirit has been restless lately. There is a reason you feel like something is coming, even though you cannot explain it logically. And there is a reason the universe keeps repeating the same patterns in front of your eyes. Because your twin flame journey is no longer distant. It is approaching faster than you think. Right now, many chosen ones are entering a season where the spiritual signs become impossible to ignore. The dreams become more vivid. The emotional waves become stronger. Old relationships begin collapsing unexpectedly. People start disappearing without explanation. You may even feel detached from places and conversations that once felt familiar. And the strange part is this. Even while everything seems to be falling apart around you, something deep inside your soul keeps whispering that a breakthrough is near. Have you noticed that? Have you felt moments where your heart suddenly became emotional without warning? Moments where you looked at the clock and saw 11:11 again and again? Moments where a random song felt like it was speaking directly to your spirit? Or perhaps you keep thinking about someone you haven't even met yet, a mysterious presence your soul somehow recognizes before your mind understands. That is not coincidence. That is spiritual alignment. And the reason the signs keep repeating is because heaven knows you are standing at the edge of transformation. Many people miss their destiny because they dismiss the signs too early. They convince themselves they are imagining things. They ignore their intuition. They return to toxic cycles because familiarity feels safer than change. But your spirit was never meant to stay asleep forever. God has been trying to wake you up. The repeated signs are not punishment. They are divine interruption. Think about everything that happened over the past year. Think about how many times your heart was broken. Think about the betrayal you experienced from people you trusted deeply. Some of you gave love to people who only used your kindness. Some of you stayed loyal while others abandoned you the moment life became difficult. Some of you cried in silence while pretending to be strong for everyone else. And yet, despite all the pain, you survived. You survived because your story was never supposed to end in heartbreak. It was preparing you for alignment. What most people do not understand about the twin flame journey is that it often begins with destruction before union. Before divine love arrives, false foundations must collapse. Every connection built on manipulation, dependency, ego, or illusion begins to break apart. Why? Because your soul cannot carry old energy into a divine connection. And that is exactly why the attacks intensified recently. The enemy always reacts when destiny gets close. That sudden confusion you felt, the emotional exhaustion, the anxiety that appeared out of nowhere, the overwhelming urge to isolate yourself, those moments were not signs that you were failing. They were signs that your spirit was moving between two realities, the old version of your life and the new timeline God is preparing for you. Some of you have even felt like nobody understands you anymore. You sit in rooms full of people and still feel alone. You try to explain your emotions, but others dismiss your intuition as overthinking. You feel disconnected from conversations that once entertained you. Certain friendships suddenly feel heavy. Certain environments drain your energy immediately. And secretly you've wondered, why do I feel different from everyone else? Because your soul is evolving faster than your surroundings. Not everyone can follow you into the next chapter. That is one of the hardest truths chosen ones must accept. Sometimes the isolation is necessary. Sometimes God removes people because their energy cannot enter the future He designed for you. And while you were grieving those losses, heaven was making space for something sacred. Your twin flame connection is not an ordinary relationship. It is not built on superficial attraction or temporary emotional comfort. It is a mirror connection, a spiritual awakening disguised as love. It forces healing. It exposes wounds. It reveals hidden fears. It pushes both souls toward transformation. That is why divine timing matters so much. If the connection had happened too early, neither of you would have been ready. You would have destroyed each other with unhealed pain. So instead, God allowed separation seasons, delays, lessons, heartbreaks, silence, not to torture you, but to prepare your spirit for the depth of the connection you are about to experience. And now the signs are increasing, because preparation is turning into alignment. Something is shifting. You can feel it. Even your intuition has become louder lately. You sense energy before people speak. You feel emotionally connected to things you cannot explain logically. Your dreams carry strange messages. Your spirit reacts strongly to certain names, songs, places, or memories. Some of you have even experienced moments where you suddenly stopped chasing people who once consumed your entire heart. Almost overnight, the obsession faded. The attachment loosened. And in its place came a strange sense of peace. That is not emotional numbness. That is energetic release. Your soul is making room. And here is the powerful part most people are not ready to hear. Your twin flame may already be feeling your energy too. While you're seeing repeated signs, they may also be experiencing emotional awakenings they cannot explain. They may suddenly feel pulled toward change. They may feel restless at night. They may feel the urge to leave toxic situations behind. They may even be dreaming about someone whose face they cannot fully remember yet. Because souls recognize each other before physical reunion happens. Energy connects before words do. That is why the universe keeps pushing signs into your path. The repetition is intentional. Heaven is trying to keep you spiritually awake during the final stages of preparation. Do not return to the old cycle now. Do not run back toward the people who broke your spirit simply because loneliness became uncomfortable. And most importantly, do not doubt yourself just because others cannot see what you feel. Chosen ones were never meant to follow the crowd. They were meant to follow divine guidance. Right now, your biggest assignment is trust. Trust what your spirit has been sensing. Trust the doors that closed unexpectedly. Trust the relationships that fell apart. Trust the uncomfortable transformation happening inside you. Because one day soon, you will look back and realize the repeated signs were not trying to confuse you. They were trying to guide you toward the love, healing, and destiny that had your name written on it long before you were born. The path is opening now. The delays are ending. And the reason God keeps repeating the same sign is because your twin flame path is no longer far away. Nobody talks enough about the loneliness that comes before a twin flame awakening. People love to talk about reunion. They love to talk about soulmates, synchronicities, and divine love. But very few people tell the truth about the emotional wilderness you must walk through before your spirit is ready to recognize what was destined for you. Because before the alignment comes the separation. Before the peace comes the confusion. And before you meet the person connected to your soul, you often experience one of the darkest emotional seasons of your life. That is where many of you are right now. You smile in front of people while carrying silent heartbreak inside your chest. You answer messages while secretly feeling emotionally exhausted. You continue functioning, working, helping others, and pretending to be okay, even though part of you feels deeply disconnected from the world around you. And what hurts the most is not just the pain itself. It is the feeling that nobody truly understands what you are carrying. Have you noticed how your entire life seems to have followed the same painful pattern? You loved deeply, but others loved conditionally. You stayed loyal, but others disappeared when things became difficult. You forgave people who never apologized. You poured energy into relationships that slowly drained your spirit. And somehow, no matter how much kindness you gave, you still ended up feeling abandoned. Why? Why did you always feel like the one who cared more? Why did people misunderstand your intentions so easily? Why did family members dismiss your emotions as too sensitive? Why did friends only come close when they needed something from you? Why did romantic connections begin intensely but collapse into confusion, distance, or betrayal? There is a spiritual reason for that pattern. Chosen souls often experience emotional isolation long before divine alignment arrives. Not because they are cursed, not because they are weak, but because their spirit was never designed to fully belong inside shallow connections. You were built for depth, and depth terrifies people who only know surface-level love. That is why so many of you have spent years feeling emotionally homeless. Even in relationships, you felt unseen. Even around family, you felt different. Even in crowded rooms, your soul still felt alone. Some of you learned very early in life that your emotions were too much for others. Maybe you were the child who felt everything deeply, while everyone else ignored their feelings. Maybe you were the one who noticed tension in the room before anyone spoke. Maybe you always sensed hidden emotions, hidden lies, hidden energy. And because nobody explained your sensitivity properly, you began questioning yourself. You learned to silence your intuition. You learned to suppress your emotions so others would feel comfortable. You learned to accept less than you deserved because you feared being abandoned completely. But your soul never stopped searching for something real. That is why temporary relationships could never fully satisfy you. You tried to force yourself to settle. You tried to convince yourself that ordinary love should be enough. You tried to ignore the emptiness inside you by becoming busy, distracted, productive, or emotionally unavailable. But late at night, when everything became quiet, the truth returned. Something was missing. Not attention. Not validation. Not status. Soul recognition. Your spirit has been searching for a connection that feels like home. And the painful part is that many of you looked for that feeling in people who were never capable of giving it to you. Some of you stayed in relationships long after your intuition warned you to leave. You tolerated emotional inconsistency because you hoped love would eventually change the other person. You accepted breadcrumbs while giving your entire heart. And every time they disappointed you, a deeper wound opened inside your spirit. Not because you were weak, but because your soul was tired of counterfeit connections. There are people listening to this message right now who have cried themselves to sleep without telling anyone. People who felt emotionally invisible for years. People who were betrayed by the very individuals they trusted most. Some of you were manipulated. Some of you were abandoned. Some of you were gaslit until you stopped trusting your own intuition. Some of you carried entire relationships emotionally, while the other person gave almost nothing in return. And perhaps the most painful part of all, you still blamed yourself afterward. You wondered if you were too emotional, too loving, too loyal, too intense, too difficult to understand. But let me tell you something your wounded heart desperately needs to hear. You were never too much. You were simply offering divine-level love to people committed to surface-level existence. There is a difference. And one of the hardest spiritual lessons chosen ones must learn is this. Not everyone who enters your life is capable of meeting you at the depth your soul requires. That realization hurts. Especially when it involves family. Because some of you expected the people closest to you to understand your heart. But instead, they dismissed your dreams, mocked your sensitivity, minimized your pain, or projected their own wounds onto you. You may have even felt guilty for wanting more from life. More peace, more purpose, more spiritual connection, more authentic love. But every time you tried to evolve, certain people made you feel selfish, unrealistic, or disconnected from reality. What they did not understand is that your soul was responding to a divine calling they could not yet perceive. And because they could not understand your transformation, they interpreted your evolution as distance. That is why this journey often feels lonely. Growth separates you from environments that can no longer hold your spirit. You begin craving silence more than noise. You begin protecting your energy more carefully. You stop forcing conversations that drain you. You stop begging people to understand your heart. And slowly, almost painfully, you begin realizing that isolation was not punishment. It was preparation. God had to separate you emotionally before introducing you spiritually. Because if you were still emotionally addicted to toxic validation, you would not recognize your twin flame clearly when the alignment begins. You would mistake divine love for another painful cycle. So heaven allowed disappointment to teach discernment. Think about that carefully. Every betrayal sharpened your intuition. Every heartbreak revealed your wounds. Every abandonment forced you to stop seeking your worth through other people. And while it felt cruel at the time, your soul was being refined. This is why many chosen ones suddenly enter periods where old friendships collapse all at once. Conversations feel forced. Certain people disappear unexpectedly. You outgrow environments you once loved. At first, it feels terrifying. You think you are losing everything. But spiritually, you are being repositioned. Because your next chapter cannot be built on expired energy. And deep inside, you already know this. That is why your tolerance for fake love has become smaller recently. You can no longer pretend. You can no longer ignore red flags. You can no longer abandon yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. Something inside you has changed permanently. Your soul has become exhausted with survival mode. Now it wants truth. Now it wants peace. Now it wants alignment. And that emotional shift is not random. It means your spirit is getting closer to the frequency of your twin flame connection. Because divine love does not arrive to reinforce your wounds. It arrives to expose and heal them. But before healing fully enters your life, loneliness often reaches its peak. That is the stage many of you are in right now. You are between worlds. No longer connected to your old identity, but not fully standing inside your new reality yet. And that space can feel incredibly painful. But listen carefully. Just because you feel alone does not mean you are abandoned. Just because people misunderstood you does not mean you are unlovable. And just because your heart was broken before does not mean destiny forgot about you. In fact, the loneliness itself may have been one of the biggest signs that your soul was being prepared for. Something sacred. Because when your twin flame finally enters your life, the connection will not feel like performance. It will feel like recognition. For the first time, your spirit will not need to beg to be understood. For the first time, your energy will not feel too much. For the first time, you will realize how exhausting it was to spend your entire life shrinking yourself just to fit inside spaces that were never designed for your soul. And when that moment comes, you will finally understand something that once felt impossible to believe. You were never alone because you were forgotten. You were alone because God was separating you from everything that could not follow you into your divine alignment. What if the greatest heartbreak of your life was never meant to destroy you? What if the delays, the endings, the betrayals, and the unbearable loneliness were not signs that God abandoned you, but evidence that heaven was separating you from a life that no longer matched your destiny? Most people misunderstand spiritual separation. They think when relationships collapse, it means failure. They think when someone walks away, it means they were not worthy of love. They think delays mean rejection. They think silence means nothing is happening. But on the twin flame journey, separation is often sacred preparation. Because divine alignment cannot happen while you are still emotionally chained to old versions of yourself. That is why so many chosen ones experience destruction before union. God removes what cannot go where you are going. And the painful truth is that many of the people you loved were connected to your lessons, not your future. At first, that realization hurts deeply. You replay memories in your head, wondering why someone who once promised forever suddenly became distant. You question yourself endlessly. You search for closure in conversations that never gave you peace. You blame yourself for staying too long. You blame yourself for loving too deeply. But eventually, your spirit begins waking up to something higher. You begin realizing that some people entered your life to awaken your wounds, not complete your destiny. There is a difference between karmic attachment and divine connection. Karmic relationships often begin with intensity, obsession, emotional chaos, and instability. They trigger your abandonment wounds. They create addiction disguised as passion. They keep you emotionally anxious, constantly chasing reassurance, validation, or consistency. And because the emotions feel so powerful, many people mistake the connection for destiny. But real divine alignment does not require you to abandon yourself to keep someone else. Real divine love does not feed on confusion. Real soul connection does not force you to beg for basic emotional safety. That is why so many of your old relationships had to collapse. Not because love failed, but because illusion expired. God could not allow you to enter your twin flame season while still emotionally attached to counterfeit love. So he began removing masks. One by one, people revealed who they truly were. Some became cold. Some betrayed your trust. Some disappeared without explanation. Some only returned when they needed access to your energy again. And every time another relationship broke apart, your heart whispered the same painful question. Why does everyone leave me? But perhaps they were not leaving because you were unworthy. Perhaps they were leaving because their role in your story was finished. That is one of the hardest spiritual truths to accept. Not everyone is meant to walk with you forever. Some people are only bridges between versions of yourself. They arrive to teach you boundaries, to reveal your wounds, to expose your fears, to force spiritual growth. And once the lesson is complete, the connection begins collapsing naturally. At first, you resist it. You try to save the relationship. You over-explain your feelings. You overextend your patience. You convince yourself that if you love harder, sacrifice more, or remain loyal long enough, things will finally change. But deep down, your intuition already knew the truth. Your soul was exhausted, because you were trying to build permanence inside temporary energy. Many chosen ones reach a breaking point where they suddenly cannot tolerate emotional inconsistency anymore. The same behaviors they once excused begin feeling unbearable. Conversations that once comforted them suddenly feel draining. Situations they once fought desperately to keep begin falling apart effortlessly. That is not emotional instability. That is spiritual awakening. Your energy begins rejecting what your soul has outgrown. And the reason this phase feels so painful is because separation strips away illusion. You can no longer lie to yourself about who truly values you. You can no longer pretend toxic dynamics are healthy. You can no longer confuse emotional attachment with genuine soul connection. And once your spirit sees the truth clearly, there is no returning to unconsciousness again. That is why many of you have felt emotionally detached lately. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming aware. There is a huge difference. Awareness changes your tolerance. Suddenly, you notice manipulation faster. You notice when energy feels forced. You notice when people only love you conditionally. You notice when relationships survive only because you are the one carrying them emotionally. And while this awareness initially feels lonely, it is actually preparing you for alignment. Because your twin flame connection cannot be built on self-abandonment. It requires authenticity. It requires emotional truth. It requires both souls to confront their wounds honestly. That is why the separation season often becomes so intense before reunion energy begins. Everything false must surface first. Think about your life carefully. Have you noticed how many things collapsed recently all at once? Friendships changed. Romantic connections ended. Career paths shifted unexpectedly. Your interests changed. Your priorities transformed. Even your identity began evolving. Sometimes it felt like your entire life was being dismantled piece by piece. And perhaps you wondered, why is everything falling apart at the same time? because heaven was clearing space. You cannot step into a divine chapter while dragging expired energy behind you. God had to empty your hands before placing destiny inside them. And yes, the process hurts, because separation feels like grief. You grieve people who are still alive. You grieve versions of yourself that no longer exist. You grieve dreams that never unfolded the way you expected. You grieve the time you lost trying to force connections that were never aligned. There are nights when the silence feels unbearable. Nights when you question whether love even exists for you at all. Nights when loneliness whispers lies into your mind. But what if those lonely nights were actually rebuilding your relationship with yourself? Because before divine union happens externally, spiritual union begins internally. The twin flame journey is not only about meeting another person. It is about becoming whole enough to stop abandoning yourself. That is the lesson separation teaches. Every painful ending forced you to confront something unresolved inside your spirit. Your fear of rejection. Your fear of being alone. Your addiction to external validation. Your tendency to overgive. Your habit of settling for emotionally unavailable people. Your instinct to chase love instead of receiving it naturally. Separation exposed all of it. Not to shame you. To heal you. And the healing process changes everything. Slowly, you begin choosing peace over chaos. You stop forcing conversations that lack reciprocity. You stop chasing people who enjoy being pursued but never commit fully. You stop begging others to recognize your value. You begin protecting your energy differently. You begin listening to your intuition more seriously. And eventually, something powerful happens. You stop fearing solitude. That moment changes your spiritual frequency completely. Because once you no longer fear being alone, you stop settling for connections that dishonor your soul. And that is often the exact moment divine alignment accelerates. Why? Because desperation disappears. You no longer seek love to escape emptiness. You seek connection from wholeness. That energetic shift is massive. And many of you are entering that shift right now. You can feel yourself detaching from old cycles emotionally. The same people who once had power over your emotions no longer affect you the same way. The same toxic patterns feel exhausting instead of exciting. The same emotional games now feel obvious. Your soul is graduating. And while you may not fully see it yet, your twin flame path is opening through every painful release you survived. The delays were not meaningless. The heartbreak was not wasted. The separation was not punishment. It was preparation. Preparation for a connection that mirrors your soul instead of draining it. Preparation for a love that does not require performance. Preparation for emotional safety instead of emotional confusion. Preparation for alignment instead of survival. One day, you will look back at the people who left your life and realize something shocking. Had they stayed, you would never have become the person capable of receiving what God truly had planned for you. And suddenly, every painful ending will make sense. Because what broke your heart was never meant to break your destiny. It was only clearing the path toward it. The sign keeps returning because your soul is getting closer to something it was destined to. Recognize, this is not your imagination. It is not obsession. And it is not coincidence that the same numbers, symbols, songs, dreams, names, and emotional sensations keep appearing in your life at the exact moment your spirit is changing. God repeats what the soul is finally ready to hear. That is why the signs have become stronger recently. At first, maybe you ignored them. You brushed them off as random patterns. You laughed at the strange timing. You convinced yourself it meant nothing. But then it kept happening. Again. And again. And again. You look at the clock, 11:11. You think about someone suddenly, and their name appears minutes later. A song begins playing with lyrics that describe your exact emotional state. You dream about a person whose energy feels familiar, even though you cannot explain why. You feel an unexplainable pull toward change, toward healing, toward someone you have not fully met yet, but somehow your soul already recognizes. And what makes this even more unsettling is that the signs usually intensify during your hardest emotional seasons. Right when you feel lost. Right when you are about to give up. Right when loneliness becomes unbearable. That is often when the universe becomes loudest. Why? Because spiritual repetition is meant to wake you up before divine alignment arrives. Many chosen ones experience repeated signs before major shifts in their twin flame journey. Not because the universe wants to confuse them, but because their spirit is being prepared to recognize a connection that exists beyond logic. The human mind wants evidence, but the soul recognizes energy first. That is why some of you have been feeling emotionally connected to something you cannot fully explain yet. Your spirit senses movement before your physical reality catches up. Think about the strange patterns that have followed you recently. Perhaps you keep seeing repeated numbers everywhere you go. 1111, 222, 223, 224. Perhaps you wake up during the same hour every night. Perhaps certain words keep appearing in conversations. Perhaps random strangers say things that directly answer questions you never spoke aloud. Perhaps you feel emotionally overwhelmed after hearing a specific song or visiting a certain place. And maybe the strangest part of all, you cannot stop thinking about it. Even when you try to ignore the signs, they return stronger. That is because divine alignment does not disappear simply because the mind feels uncomfortable. The soul continues calling you forward. And one of the biggest mistakes people make during this stage is doubting their intuition because others cannot understand what they are experiencing. Please hear this carefully. Not everyone is spiritually sensitive enough to recognize energetic communication. Some people only trust what they can physically touch. But chosen ones often experience spiritual movement internally long before anything manifests externally. That is why your intuition has become so intense lately. You feel energy shifts immediately. You notice emotional tension before people speak. You sense when someone is thinking about you. You feel emotionally connected to situations that make no logical sense. And sometimes it overwhelms you, because no one taught you how to navigate spiritual awareness properly. Instead, you were taught to suppress it, to ignore your feelings, to prioritize logic over intuition. But your soul was never designed to live disconnected from divine guidance. That is why the signs continue repeating. The repetition itself carries a message. Fais attention, something is changing. And the deeper truth is this. The signs are not only about another person. They are also about your transformation. Every repeated symbol is trying to guide you back toward alignment with yourself. Because before you can recognize your twin flame externally, your spirit must awaken internally. That is why many of you began experiencing signs only after painful endings. The heartbreak cracked your emotional walls open. The betrayal forced you inward. The loneliness activated deeper self-awareness. And suddenly, you started noticing things your old self would have ignored completely. This is not accidental. Pain often becomes the doorway to spiritual awakening. When life feels stable and comfortable, people rarely question their path deeply. They remain distracted, numb, spiritually asleep. But suffering changes perception. Loss changes perception. Separation changes perception. And during those painful seasons, your soul becomes more receptive to divine communication. That is why the signs increased after your life started falling apart. Because spiritually, your old identity was dying, and your awakened self was beginning to emerge. Some of you have even experienced moments where the signs felt almost impossible to deny. You prayed for confirmation and received it immediately. You thought about leaving a toxic situation and suddenly saw repeated messages about new beginnings. You cried at night asking God whether you were truly alone, and the next day, synchronicities surrounded you everywhere. These moments are not random accidents. They are alignment markers, spiritual checkpoints, gentle reminders that even during uncertainty, your soul is still being guided. But here is something important you must understand. The signs themselves are not the destination. They are invitations. Many people become obsessed with chasing numbers, chasing synchronicities, chasing confirmation. They begin worshiping the signs instead of understanding the purpose behind them. The purpose is awakening. The purpose is healing. The purpose is alignment. The purpose is preparing you emotionally, spiritually, and energetically for the next chapter of your life. And that next chapter often involves releasing fear. Because fear blocks clarity. Fear keeps people emotionally trapped in old cycles. Fear convinces you that the pain of the familiar is safer than the uncertainty of transformation. That is why some people continue returning to karmic relationships even while receiving clear, spiritual signs to move forward. The soul knows the truth, but fear resists change. Still, the signs continue, because destiny is patient. And if you are hearing this message today, there is a reason. Your spirit is ready to understand something your old self could not fully grasp before. The repeated signs are not warning you that love is far away. They are preparing you because it is getting closer. That sudden emotional shift you feel lately? That growing detachment from toxic people? That desire for peace instead of chaos? That exhaustion with superficial relationships? Those are signs too. Your frequency is changing. You are no longer energetically compatible with environments that once drained your soul. And when your energy changes, your reality begins reorganizing itself around your new alignment. That process can feel uncomfortable, sometimes terrifying, because the old life begins collapsing before the new one fully arrives. But spiritually, that collapse is often evidence that movement has already begun. Think about a caterpillar before transformation. To the outside world, everything appears to dissolve before something beautiful emerges. That is what many of you are experiencing now. You are between identities, between timelines, between emotional versions of yourself. And the repeated signs are heaven's way of reminding you not to panic during the transition. Because your twin flame journey is not unfolding randomly. It is unfolding strategically. Even now, while you question the timing, while you wonder why things have taken so long, while you struggle to understand the uncertainty, your soul is still being guided toward alignment. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all is this. Your twin flame may also be receiving signs right now. While you're seeing numbers, dreams, synchronicities, and emotional shifts, they may be awakening too. They may not fully understand it yet. They may still be healing, still evolving, still releasing their own karmic cycles. But energetically, the path between you is already activating. That is why your intuition refuses to stay silent. That is why the signs refuse to disappear. Because heaven knows something your human mind still struggles to trust. The connection written for your soul is no longer distant. And every repeated sign is preparing your heart to finally receive it. If your twin flame connection is truly destined, then why did it take so long? Why did God allow so many delays? Why did you have to suffer through heartbreak after heartbreak while carrying this strange feeling that someone important was still meant to enter your life? These are the questions many chosen ones ask during the hardest part of the journey. Because the delay can feel cruel. You watch time pass while your soul grows tired. You wonder whether you misunderstood the signs. You question your intuition. Some days you even question God himself. You ask, if this connection is real, why has everything been so difficult? But what if the delay was never rejection? What if the delay was protection? Most people think divine timing means waiting passively for love to appear. But the truth is much deeper than that. Divine timing is not about punishment. It is about preparation. Because if the connection arrived before both souls were emotionally ready, the relationship would collapse under the weight of unhealed pain. And many of you were carrying pain far deeper than you realized. Some wounds came from childhood. The fear of abandonment. The fear of not being enough. The fear of being replaced. The fear of vulnerability. Some wounds came from past relationships where you gave everything and received almost nothing in return. Some wounds came from years of people misunderstanding your sensitivity, your depth, your emotional intensity. And over time, those experiences shaped the way you loved. You became hypervigilant. You overthought messages. You feared silence. You attached your worth to whether people stayed or left. You chased reassurance because your nervous system learned to expect inconsistency. And while none of that makes you weak, it does mean healing was necessary before divine union could happen safely. That is why the delay happened. Not because you were forgotten, because your spirit needed restoration. Think about who you were a few years ago. Would the version of you from back then truly have been ready for the connection you are asking for? Now? Probably not. Many chosen ones initially seek divine love while still abandoning themselves emotionally. They tolerate disrespect, ignore red flags, confuse intensity with compatibility, overgive to prove their worth. And if a twin flame reunion occurred during that stage, the connection would become chaotic instead of healing. Why? Because twin flames mirror unresolved wounds. They amplify everything hidden beneath the surface. Your fears, your insecurities, your emotional patterns, your deepest longing for love. This is why so many twin flame journeys involve periods of separation, silence, or delay. The connection itself activates transformation. And transformation is rarely comfortable. Some of you thought the delay meant you were failing spiritually. But in reality, your soul was undergoing reconstruction. God was teaching you how to stop chasing love from wounded energy. That lesson changes everything. Because wounded love says, I need someone to choose me so I can feel worthy. But healed love says, I already recognize my value, and I refuse to abandon myself for connection. That shift is massive. And it takes time. Many of you had to unlearn years of emotional survival patterns before alignment could fully unfold. You had to learn boundaries. You had to learn discernment. You had to learn that peace matters more than temporary attention. You had to stop confusing emotional chaos with passion. You had to stop shrinking yourself to keep others comfortable. And perhaps the hardest lesson of all, you had to learn how to be alone without believing you were unloved. That lesson transforms the soul profoundly. Because once you stop fearing solitude, desperation loses control over your decisions. You stop accepting half-love. You stop begging for consistency. You stop romanticizing emotionally unavailable people. You stop settling simply because loneliness feels uncomfortable. And that energetic shift changes the kind of relationships you attract completely. That is why the delay was necessary. God was removing your addiction to survival love before introducing you to divine love. And please understand something important. Your twin flame was also healing during this time. This journey was never one-sided. While you were learning painful lessons, they were too. While you were crying, growing, releasing, and transforming, they were confronting their own fears, wounds, karmic cycles, and emotional patterns. Perhaps they also experienced heartbreak. Perhaps they also lost people they thought would stay forever. Perhaps they also had to confront painful truths about themselves. Because divine alignment requires both souls to evolve. And sometimes, one soul awakens earlier than the other. That can feel incredibly frustrating. Especially when your intuition senses the connection strongly, while physical reality still feels uncertain. But spiritual movement often happens long before physical reunion appears externally. Seeds grow underground before anyone sees flowers above the surface. Remember that. Just because you cannot see the full manifestation, yet does not mean nothing is happening. Some of the most important transformations occur invisibly. That is exactly what many of you have been experiencing lately. Internally, you are no longer the same person. Your priorities changed. Your standards changed. Your emotional awareness deepened. Even your energy feels different now. Things that once excited you no longer fulfill you. People who once had emotional access to you no longer affect you the same way. You crave peace more than validation, truth more than fantasy, depth more than attention. And this evolution happened because of the delay. The waiting season refined you. It exposed where you still needed healing. It revealed where fear still controlled your decisions. It forced you to confront the parts of yourself that were still searching for worth through external approval. And slowly, painfully, beautifully you began changing. That is why many chosen ones eventually reach a point where they stop obsessing over when the reunion will happen. Instead, they focus on becoming emotionally aligned with the life they truly deserve. Ironically, that is often when reunion energy accelerates. Because attachment loosens, fear weakens, trust deepens, and your soul stops operating from desperation. There is also another reason the delay happened that many people overlook. Timing affects destiny. Imagine meeting your twin flame before either of you had developed emotional maturity. The connection might have triggered more destruction than healing. You may have projected old wounds onto each other constantly. Miscommunication could have destroyed the bond before either soul understood its purpose. So heaven slowed the process down, not to deny the connection, to protect it. Sometimes the greatest act of divine love is delay, because rushing sacred things often destroys them. Think about how many moments in your life only made sense afterward. At the time, you thought rejection was punishment. Later, you realized it was redirection. At the time, you thought a closed door ruined your future. Later, you realized it saved you from suffering. The twin flame journey works the same way. One day, you will look back and understand why certain things could not happen earlier. You will understand why specific people had to leave, why certain relationships collapsed, why you needed solitude, why your spirit had to awaken slowly instead of instantly. Because had everything arrived too early, you would not have recognized the blessing properly. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all is this. The delay is ending for many of you now. You can feel it emotionally. The heavy waiting energy is shifting. The obsessive chasing energy is fading. Your intuition feels calmer. Your spirit feels more surrendered. Instead of forcing outcomes, you are beginning to trust divine timing more deeply. That inner peace is not random. It often appears right before alignment accelerates. Because once fear stops controlling your energy, the path opens differently. And yes, there may still be moments of uncertainty ahead. There may still be lessons unfolding. But your soul is no longer where it used to be. You are stronger now, wiser now, more emotionally aware now. The version of you reading this today is far more prepared for divine love than the version of you who first began this journey. That growth matters. Your healing matters. Your transformation matters. Nothing you survived was meaningless. Every painful delay shaped your spirit into someone capable of receiving a connection built not on illusion, dependency, or fear but on truth. So if you have been asking why God allowed the waiting season to last so long, here is your answer. Because heaven was preparing both souls for a reunion powerful enough to change the rest of your lives. Something inside you has changed recently. You may not have fully understood it at first. In fact, part of you may still be trying to explain it logically. But deep down, your spirit already knows the truth. You are entering a new energetic season. That is why things that once felt important suddenly feel meaningless. That is why certain people no longer affect you the same way. That is why your emotions have become deeper, quieter, and strangely more intuitive all at once. An energetic shift is happening. And for many chosen ones, this shift happens right before a major twin flame alignment begins. At first, the transformation feels subtle. You simply notice that your tolerance has changed. You no longer want chaotic conversations. You no longer feel excited by superficial attention. You no longer have the energy to chase people who give mixed signals. Things that once kept you emotionally addicted now feel exhausting instead of attractive. And perhaps the strangest part of all, you did not force this change. It happened naturally. Almost like your soul became tired of surviving the same emotional cycle over and over again. That is one of the clearest signs your frequency is evolving. Because when your spirit begins preparing for divine alignment, your energy starts rejecting what no longer matches your future. This is why many of you suddenly feel disconnected from old environments. Places you once loved now feel heavy. Certain friendships feel emotionally draining. Even social media, entertainment, or conversations that once distracted you now leave you feeling empty afterward. It is not because you are becoming cold or antisocial. Your soul is craving depth. And once spiritual awakening begins, surface-level energy becomes difficult to tolerate. That shift can feel lonely at first. Because while your spirit is evolving, the people around you may still expect the old version of you to remain the same. They may not understand why you became quieter, why you pull away from drama, why you suddenly protect your peace more fiercely, why you stopped explaining yourself. But what they interpret as distance is actually spiritual recalibration. You are learning to stop leaking energy into places that cannot nourish your soul. And that lesson changes your entire reality. Have you noticed how emotionally sensitive you have become lately? You feel energy instantly now. You can sense tension before anyone speaks. You can walk into a room and immediately know whether the atmosphere feels genuine or forced. You notice when someone's words do not match their energy. You feel emotionally exhausted after interacting with certain people, while other energies bring unexpected calmness. This heightened sensitivity is not weakness. It is spiritual awareness expanding. And while it can feel overwhelming sometimes, it is also preparing you for soul recognition. Because twin flame connections are deeply energetic before they are physical. Your soul recognizes frequency long before your mind understands the connection logically. That is why many chosen ones experience strange emotional symptoms before reunion energy intensifies. Some people suddenly begin waking up between 2 and 4 a.m. repeatedly. Some experience vivid dreams that feel more real than ordinary memories. Some feel waves of emotion that appear without explanation. Others suddenly feel an unexplainable inner peace after years of emotional chaos. All of these can be signs of energetic transition. Your soul is shifting timelines emotionally. You are moving away from survival energy and closer toward alignment energy. And one of the biggest signs this shift is happening is emotional detachment from the past. Notice this carefully. The same people who once controlled your emotions no longer have the same power over you. The same painful memories no longer break you the way they once did. The same toxic cycles that once felt impossible to leave now feel emotionally unbearable to continue. This is huge, because it means your spirit is no longer negotiating with its own worth. Many chosen ones mistake this phase for emotional numbness at first. They wonder, why do I suddenly feel disconnected from everything? But the truth is, you are not becoming disconnected from life. You are disconnecting from illusion. And there is a difference. You are no longer emotionally attached to things that kept your soul trapped. That is why your inner world feels so different lately. You are changing frequencies. And whenever frequency changes, reality begins reorganizing itself around the new vibration. This is why people suddenly disappear during awakening seasons. Why unexpected endings happen. Why old opportunities collapse. Why intuition becomes louder than external validation. Spiritually, your life is being repositioned. And even though it may feel uncertain at times, this shift is happening for you, not against you. Many of you have also noticed something else recently. A strange sense of calm is beginning to replace desperation. You still care about love. You still desire connection. But the obsessive chasing energy is fading. You no longer feel willing to destroy yourself emotionally just to keep someone interested. You no longer crave validation from people who cannot see your value. And while loneliness still appears sometimes, it no longer controls your identity completely. This emotional shift is powerful, because desperation repels alignment, while inner peace attracts it. The universe responds differently when your energy stops operating from fear. That is why many twin flame reunions accelerate after both souls begin surrendering control. Emotionally. Not giving up. Surrendering. There is a difference. Giving up comes from hopelessness. Surrender comes from trust. And your soul is slowly learning trust now. Trusting divine timing. Trusting intuition. Trusting that what is meant for you will not require self-betrayal. That lesson opens spiritual doors. But there is another part of this energetic shift that many people are afraid to talk about: the grief. Because awakening also involves mourning. You are grieving the old version of yourself. The version who tolerated less. The version who begged for love. The version who confused suffering with emotional connection. The version who kept chasing people incapable of meeting your soul fully. And as you release those patterns, sadness naturally rises to the surface. Some days you feel incredibly hopeful. Other days you feel emotionally exhausted. That emotional fluctuation is normal during energetic transformation. Healing is not linear. Awakening is not linear. The soul unfolds in layers. But even during the difficult moments, something inside you knows you cannot go backward anymore. You have outgrown the old cycle completely. That realization may be one of the clearest signs that your twin flame path is getting closer. Because before divine union manifests externally, inner union begins internally. You begin integrating the fragmented parts of yourself. You stop abandoning your needs. You stop ignoring your intuition. You stop sacrificing your peace for temporary emotional comfort. And through that process, your energy becomes more magnetic naturally. Not because you are trying to attract someone, but because authenticity creates alignment. Your spirit becomes clearer, calmer, more emotionally honest. And people can feel that energy shift around you. Some will be drawn toward it. Others will disappear because they can no longer manipulate the old version of you. Both outcomes are necessary, because your next chapter requires emotional truth. Not performance. Not pretending. Not survival mode. Truth. There is also a powerful possibility you need to consider. Your twin flame may already be sensing this energetic shift too. Even if physical communication has not happened, yet even if separation still exists, soul connections often respond to energetic movement long before external reunion occurs. They may suddenly begin thinking about you more intensely. They may feel emotionally restless without understanding why. They may feel drawn toward healing unexpectedly. They may even start releasing karmic relationships or old emotional attachments. Because when one soul evolves deeply, the energetic mirror often activates within the other. That is why your transformation matters so much. Your healing affects the connection. Your peace affects the connection. Your self-worth affects the connection. And perhaps that is why God allowed you to experience this awakening before reunion. Because the relationship itself is not the true destination. Alignment is. The relationship is simply the physical expression of two souls who finally became emotionally ready to meet each other without destroying themselves in the process. And if you have been feeling this energetic shift lately, if your spirit feels different, if your intuition has become louder, if your attachment to old pain is slowly dissolving, then listen carefully. You are not losing yourself. You are finally becoming the version of yourself your destiny has been waiting for. What if you are not the only one feeling this shift? What if the strange emotional waves, the repeated signs, the sudden memories, and the unexplainable pull toward transformation are not happening only to you? Because one of the deepest truths about the twin flame journey is this: when one soul begins awakening, the other soul often feels it too. Even across distance. Even during silence. Even when physical communication does not exist. Soul connections do not operate according to ordinary human logic. That is why many chosen ones experience moments that feel impossible to explain rationally. You think about someone suddenly, and your emotions intensify out of nowhere. You feel connected to an unseen presence during difficult moments. Certain dreams feel emotionally real instead of symbolic. Some days you even feel like your spirit is communicating with someone beyond words. And perhaps the most confusing part is this: you cannot fully prove any of it. That uncertainty can make you question yourself. You wonder if you are imagining things. You wonder if loneliness created fantasy. You wonder whether your intuition can truly be trusted. But deep inside, your soul keeps responding to something deeper than logic. Because energy speaks before the physical world catches up. And many twin flame awakenings begin exactly this way. Long before reunion manifests externally, both souls begin shifting internally. That is why the signs became stronger recently. Not because you are becoming delusional, but because the energetic bond between you is becoming more active. Have you noticed how your emotions sometimes change suddenly without explanation? You could be having an ordinary day, and then out of nowhere, a wave of sadness, longing, peace, or nostalgia appears. Sometimes it happens late at night. Sometimes it happens while hearing a specific song. Sometimes it happens for no visible reason at all. For many spiritually sensitive people, these emotional shifts are connected to energetic mirroring. Twin flames often trigger emotional movement within each other unconsciously. And while this can sound overwhelming at first, it becomes easier to understand when you realize that deep soul connections are not limited to physical communication alone. Think about how often your intuition has been accurate recently. You sensed endings before they happened. You felt energy shifts before conversations changed. You recognized emotional distance before anyone admitted it openly. So why is it suddenly impossible to believe your soul could recognize a deeper spiritual connection? 2. The truth is, many chosen ones have spent their entire lives doubting themselves because the world trained them to distrust intuition. But intuition is not weakness. It is inner recognition. And right now, your spirit is recognizing movement. Your twin flame may also be entering a major awakening phase. Perhaps they are beginning to question the relationships around them. Perhaps they are feeling emotionally restless without understanding why. Perhaps old emotional wounds are surfacing inside them too. Perhaps they are finally realizing that superficial connections no longer fulfill them. Because awakening rarely happens comfortably. It disrupts everything false. That is why many twin flames go through parallel experiences without even realizing it initially. While one soul heals abandonment wounds, the other may be confronting fear of vulnerability. While one soul learns self-worth, the other may be learning emotional accountability. While one soul releases karmic attachments, the other may begin awakening spiritually for the first time. The growth mirrors itself in different ways. And sometimes, one soul awakens earlier because they are meant to energetically guide the connection first. That may be exactly what happened to you. You may have spent years feeling spiritually different from others without understanding why. Years feeling emotionally intense. Years sensing deeper meaning beneath ordinary experiences. At times, it probably felt isolating, because while others focused only on surface-level life, your soul kept searching for something deeper. Now you understand why. Your spirit was preparing for recognition. And somewhere, your twin flame may now be experiencing their own version of that awakening. Maybe they cannot explain the changes happening inside them either. Maybe they suddenly feel disconnected from old habits. Maybe they are beginning to crave peace instead of chaos. Maybe they are thinking about someone they have not fully met yet, but somehow feel emotionally connected to. Because souls often recognize each other before the physical mind understands what is happening. That is why twin flame journeys feel so strange compared to ordinary relationships. It is not only attraction. It is remembrance. A remembering that happens beneath words, beneath personality, beneath logic. And when this remembering begins activating, synchronicities often increase for both people. That is why repeated signs matter so much right now. The universe is not randomly throwing symbols into your life. It is synchronizing awareness. Some of you may have already experienced moments where the connection felt almost supernatural. You dreamed about someone before meeting them. You felt emotional shifts connected to another person's energy. You experienced impossible timing. You encountered repeated numbers during emotionally significant moments. You felt drawn toward a certain direction, even when logic disagreed completely. These moments are often dismissed by people who have never experienced spiritual awakening deeply. But for chosen ones, these experiences become impossible to ignore after a certain point. Especially because the signs intensify during periods of transformation. And your transformation is accelerating now. That is why your emotional world feels different lately. You are no longer chasing love the same way. You are no longer willing to abandon yourself for temporary connection. You are beginning to understand that divine love cannot be forced. It unfolds through alignment. That realization matters because it changes the energy of the connection itself. The more you heal, the more clearly the bond can activate without distortion from fear, desperation, or emotional dependency. This is why separation periods are often necessary. Without healing, the connection becomes overwhelmed by wounds instead of guided by truth. Many people romanticize twin flames without understanding how deeply transformative the journey truly is. This path exposes everything unresolved, every insecurity, every fear of rejection, every abandonment wound, every false belief about love. And until those wounds begin healing, reunion energy often remains blocked or unstable. But something important is happening now. You are changing emotionally. And because of that, the connection itself is changing too. Have you noticed how your obsession with controlling the outcome has weakened recently? You still care deeply, but you are beginning to surrender more. You are beginning to trust more. You are beginning to focus on your own peace instead of forcing timelines. That emotional maturity is powerful, because true twin flame alignment does not happen through chasing. It happens through energetic readiness. And readiness often arrives quietly. One day you suddenly realize you no longer need constant validation to feel worthy. You no longer panic when things feel uncertain. You no longer confuse emotional suffering with love. You begin choosing yourself differently. That inner shift creates space for healthier union. And perhaps your twin flame is reaching similar realizations right now too. Even if you cannot see it externally yet. Even if silence still exists. Even if physical reunion has not happened yet. Spiritually, movement may already be unfolding beneath the surface. Remember this. Not all progress is visible immediately. Some of the deepest transformations happen invisibly first. Seeds grow underground before flowers appear above the surface. And soul connections often evolve the same way. That is why patience matters so much on this journey. Not passive waiting. Sacred patience. The kind of patience rooted in trust instead of fear. Trust that what is divinely aligned cannot miss you. Trust that your healing is not separate from the connection. It is part of the connection. Trust that every lesson, every release, every painful awakening has been preparing both souls for something greater than temporary romance. Because the purpose of the twin flame journey is not merely relationship. It is evolution. And when two souls evolve deeply enough, reunion stops being fantasy. It becomes alignment. So if you have been feeling this strange energetic movement lately, if your intuition has become louder, if the signs continue repeating, if your emotional world feels like it is transforming from the inside out, then listen carefully. You are not awakening alone. Somewhere beyond the silence, beyond the uncertainty, beyond the distance your physical eyes can see, your twin flame may already be awakening too. If your twin flame path is truly getting closer, then there is something important you need to understand immediately. Not every habit, attachment, or emotional pattern can follow you into the next chapter of your life. Some things must end before alignment can begin. And one of the biggest reasons people delay their own spiritual union is because they continue feeding the very behaviors that keep their soul trapped in old cycles. That is why this chapter matters so deeply. Because right now, you are standing between two realities. The old version of yourself built from fear, survival, emotional exhaustion, and attachment. And the new version of yourself built from truth, peace, intuition, and alignment. The question is, which version will you continue feeding? Many chosen ones unknowingly sabotage their own healing because they are still emotionally addicted to what hurts them. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because pain became familiar. Chaos became familiar. Emotional inconsistency became familiar. And the nervous system often mistakes familiarity for love. That is why you must stop chasing what your soul has already outgrown. Stop chasing people who repeatedly confuse you. Stop chasing validation from people who only notice your value when they feel you pulling away. Stop chasing closure from individuals who never respected your emotions enough to give honesty in the first place. And most importantly, stop chasing love by abandoning yourself. Because every time you betray your intuition to keep someone else comfortable, you move further away from alignment. Think carefully about how many times your spirit warned you before heartbreak happened. You felt the red flags early. You sensed the inconsistency. You noticed the emotional distance. But instead of listening to your intuition, you tried to understand people into loving you properly. You over-explained, overgaven, overweighted, over-sacrificed, and slowly, your soul became exhausted from carrying relationships that were never balanced emotionally. This is why your awakening had to become painful. Because pain finally forced you to stop ignoring yourself. Sometimes God allows discomfort to grow so intense that remaining in the old cycle becomes impossible. That may be exactly what is happening in your life right now. You are no longer comfortable settling. Your soul refuses to shrink itself anymore. And while that change is powerful, it also requires difficult release. Because healing is not only about attracting divine love. It is also about unlearning toxic emotional patterns. One of the most dangerous patterns chosen ones carry is the belief that love must be earned through suffering. Many of you learned this unconsciously during childhood or past relationships. You learned to work for affection, to prove your worth constantly, to tolerate emotional inconsistency while hoping loyalty would eventually be rewarded. But divine love does not require self-destruction. Real connection is not built on anxiety. It is not built on fear. It is not built on constantly questioning where you stand emotionally. That is why you must stop romanticizing emotionally unavailable people. Stop interpreting mixed signals as depth. Stop confusing emotional chaos with spiritual connection. And please hear this carefully. Not every intense relationship is a twin flame connection. Some connections are karmic lessons designed to awaken your boundaries. Some people enter your life to expose your wounds, not fulfill your destiny. And if you keep mistaking pain for passion, you will continue delaying the peace your soul actually deserves. This is why discernment matters now more than ever. Your spirit is evolving. And evolved energy requires different choices. You cannot continue entertaining relationships that drain your nervous system and still expect emotional alignment to enter your life naturally. You must become honest about what your soul truly needs. Not temporary excitement. Not ego validation. Not attention. Peace. Consistency. Truth. Safety. Depth. Those are the qualities your spirit has been searching for all along. And the closer you move toward divine alignment, the less tolerance you will have for anything false. That is why many of you feel emotionally detached lately. Your soul is rejecting old survival patterns. But there is another thing you must stop doing immediately. Stop doubting your intuition every time fear appears. Fear speaks loudly. Intuition speaks quietly. And many people spend their entire lives obeying fear because it sounds more urgent. Fear says, what if you are wrong? What if nobody truly loves you? What if you end up alone? What if you missed your chance? But intuition feels different. It does not scream. It simply knows. And deep inside, your spirit already knows which people, habits, environments, and emotional patterns no longer belong in your life. You feel it every time your energy becomes heavy around certain individuals. You feel it every time your body becomes anxious while your soul tries to stay silent. You feel it every time you abandon your own needs just to avoid losing someone. That is not alignment. That is fear-based attachment. And if you continue choosing attachment over truth, your healing journey becomes delayed unnecessarily. Many chosen ones also need to stop obsessing over timing. Yes, the twin flame journey is deeply emotional. Yes, longing can feel overwhelming. But constantly checking signs, forcing outcomes, And obsessing over reunion timelines keeps your energy trapped in anxiety instead of alignment. The signs were never meant to create panic. They were meant to create awareness. Awareness that your soul is evolving. Awareness that something sacred is unfolding. Awareness that divine timing exists beyond human control. You do not need to force destiny. You need to become emotionally available for it. There is a huge difference. And emotional availability requires release. Release of control. Release of fear. Release of the need to constantly predict the future. Some of you are still carrying emotional ties to people who already showed you they cannot meet your soul properly. Not because you are weak, but because part of you still hopes they will become the version you imagined in your heart. That fantasy keeps many people emotionally imprisoned for years. But healing begins the moment you accept reality instead of potential. Who are they consistently? Not occasionally. Not temporarily. Consistently. Your soul deserves honesty. And once you begin choosing honesty over fantasy, your entire energy changes. You stop begging. You stop chasing. You stop trying to convince people to value you correctly. Because you finally understand something powerful. The right connection will not require constant emotional survival. That realization shifts your frequency dramatically. And when your frequency shifts, your reality follows. This is also why self-abandonment must end now. Stop ignoring your emotional exhaustion. Stop pretending you are okay when your spirit is crying for rest. Stop prioritizing everyone else while neglecting your own healing. Some of you spent your entire lives becoming emotionally available for others while remaining emotionally absent from yourselves. That pattern cannot continue if divine alignment is approaching. Because twin flame energy magnifies truth. If you still reject yourself internally, the connection will expose that wound intensely. That is why inner healing matters so much before reunion. The relationship itself cannot replace self-worth. It reveals it. And perhaps this is the biggest lesson of all. You do not attract divine love by becoming perfect. You attract divine love by becoming authentic. By finally telling the truth about what hurts. What drains you. What dishonors your spirit. What no longer aligns with your soul. Authenticity changes your energy. Suddenly, you stop needing external validation to feel complete. You stop performing versions of yourself designed to keep others comfortable. You begin living from emotional truth instead of emotional fear. And when that happens, something extraordinary shifts internally. Peace begins replacing desperation. You stop asking, "Will they choose me?" and begin asking, "Does this connection honor my soul?" That question changes everything. Because chosen ones were never meant to spend their lives begging for love. They were meant to awaken into it. So if you truly feel that your twin flame path is approaching, if the signs keep repeating, if your spirit feels different lately, then this is your confirmation. The old version of you cannot go where destiny is trying to lead you. Something must be released. Something must end. And perhaps the thing you must finally stop chasing is the version of love that required you to lose yourself just to keep it alive. There is a version of your future that your soul has already felt even before your eyes have seen it. That is why you cannot fully give up. Even after the heartbreak. Even after the betrayals. Even after the long nights where loneliness wrapped around your spirit like a storm you thought would never end. Something inside you still believes. Not because you are naive. Not because you are desperate. But because your soul remembers what your mind has not fully experienced yet. And right now, you are closer to that future than you realize. Many chosen ones spend years thinking their pain will last forever. They become so familiar with emotional survival that peace almost feels suspicious. They become so used to disappointment that they expect every connection to eventually collapse. But divine alignment changes the emotional atmosphere of your life completely. Not because it creates a perfect fantasy, but because it introduces truth. And after a lifetime of confusion, truth feels like peace. Can you imagine what it would feel like to finally stop questioning where you stand emotionally with someone, to stop analyzing every message, to stop wondering whether you are loved only when convenient, to stop shrinking yourself to avoid being abandoned. That future exists. And the reason your soul keeps pulling you forward is because part of you already senses it approaching. The twin flame journey is not simply about romance. It is about recognition. Recognition so deep that your spirit finally exhales after years of emotional tension. For the first time, you stop feeling like you must perform to deserve love. For the first time, your sensitivity is not treated like weakness. For the first time, someone sees the depth inside you without needing you to explain every part of your heart. Repeatedly. That kind of connection changes a person permanently. But before that future fully manifests, your spirit must release the belief that suffering is all life has prepared for you. That belief has followed many of you for years. Maybe because pain arrived early in your life. Maybe because people repeatedly disappointed you. Maybe because every time you trusted someone deeply, they eventually broke your heart. And after enough heartbreak, the soul begins protecting itself by expecting loss before love even arrives. That is why some chosen ones struggle to trust divine alignment even while receiving signs. Constantly. The wounded mind says, "What if this ends like everything else?" But your spirit feels something different now. A quiet knowing. A strange inner certainty that your story is changing. Have you noticed that lately? Even during difficult moments, there is still a small voice inside you whispering, "Do not give up yet." That voice matters, because your intuition often recognizes new seasons before physical reality fully changes. Think about how much you have transformed already. A few years ago, you tolerated relationships that drained your soul completely. You begged for consistency. You chased people who gave you the bare minimum emotionally. You confused emotional anxiety with love. But now your spirit sees differently. Now you notice energy immediately. Now you value peace more than temporary excitement. Now you understand that love should not constantly wound your nervous system. That growth is not accidental. Your soul has been preparing for a different kind of future. And one of the most beautiful parts of this journey is realizing that everything you survived was shaping your ability to receive it. Even the heartbreak had purpose. Especially the heartbreak. Because heartbreak taught you discernment. It taught you boundaries. It taught you how to stop abandoning yourself. It taught you the difference between attachment and alignment. And while those lessons were painful, they transformed you into someone capable of recognizing genuine connection clearly. One day soon, you may look back at your old life and barely recognize the version of yourself who accepted less than you deserved. That version of you was surviving. But the version emerging now is awakening. Awakening to self-worth. Awakening to emotional truth. Awakening to the realization that divine love does not require you to destroy yourself emotionally to keep it alive. Can you imagine how different your future relationships will feel once you fully understand that? No more chasing. No more emotional games. No more begging for honesty. No more overthinking whether someone truly cares. Instead, there is calmness, mutual effort, emotional safety, spiritual understanding. A connection where silence does not create panic because trust already exists beneath words. That is the future your soul keeps sensing. And perhaps that is why the signs continue repeating. Because heaven knows you are finally becoming emotionally ready to receive what once would have overwhelmed you completely. Many people think manifestation is only about attracting something externally. But spiritually, manifestation often begins with internal transformation first. Your energy changes before your reality changes. And your energy has already been changing deeply. You are no longer emotionally available for the same painful cycles. You no longer crave chaos the way you once did. You no longer feel impressed by superficial attention. Your spirit wants something real now. Something sacred. Something emotionally honest. That shift matters because divine alignment responds to authenticity. The more truthful you become with yourself, the clearer your path becomes. That is why many of you feel strangely peaceful lately, even while the future still feels uncertain. Your soul already senses movement, even if your physical eyes cannot fully see it yet. And yes, there may still be moments where fear returns. Moments where loneliness whispers old stories into your mind. Moments where waiting feels heavy again. But do not let temporary emotions erase permanent truth. You are not the same person who first started this journey. You have evolved too much to return to unconsciousness now. Your spirit has already seen too much, felt too much, awakened too much. And because of that, the future unfolding for you cannot look like the past you survived. Something greater is coming. Not perfect, not fantasy, but aligned. There is also something else many chosen ones feel shortly before major union energy arrives. A deep emotional exhaustion with the old version of life. You suddenly realize you cannot continue pretending anymore. You cannot continue entertaining false connections. You cannot continue abandoning your peace for temporary companionship. The soul becomes tired of emotional performance. That exhaustion is sacred, because it pushes you toward truth. And truth is where real alignment begins. Imagine waking up one day and no longer feeling emotionally chained to your past. Imagine no longer carrying resentment toward the people who hurt you because their role in your transformation finally makes sense. Imagine understanding that every painful ending redirected you towards something your wounded self could not yet comprehend. That realization creates freedom. And freedom changes the energy of your entire future. Because once your spirit becomes free from the past, it becomes available for destiny. That may be exactly where you are heading now. Toward emotional freedom. Toward inner peace. Toward a love that feels less like anxiety and more like recognition. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is this. Your twin flame is not entering your life to complete you. They are entering your life to meet the version of you who finally stopped abandoning themselves. That is why your healing mattered. That is why the delays mattered. That is why the repeated signs mattered. Everything was guiding you toward this transformation. And even now, while parts of the journey still feel uncertain, your soul already knows something beautiful is unfolding behind the scenes. The path is opening. The old cycle is ending. The emotional heaviness you carried for years is beginning to break apart. And one day soon, you will finally understand why God kept repeating the signs instead of allowing you to settle for a life that was never truly meant for your soul. Because your future was always bigger than your pain. If you have made it this far, then this message was never meant to find you by accident. Something inside your spirit led you here. Not curiosity alone. Recognition. Because deep down, your soul already knew that the signs repeating in your life were connected to something greater than coincidence. And now, after everything you have heard, perhaps you finally understand why. The heartbreak was not random. The delays were not punishment. The loneliness was not proof that you were forgotten. Everything was preparing you. Preparing your heart. Preparing your spirit. Preparing your energy for the moment your old life could no longer contain the person you were becoming. That is why the signs intensified. That is why the emotional pressure became heavier before the shift. That is why certain relationships collapsed so suddenly. And that is why your intuition refused to stay silent no matter how much you tried to ignore it. Because heaven was trying to wake you up before destiny arrived. Many chosen ones spend years praying for change while unknowingly clinging to the very pain they were meant to release. They ask for divine love while continuing to settle for emotional inconsistency. They ask for peace while remaining emotionally attached to chaos. They ask for alignment while still abandoning themselves to keep other people comfortable. But eventually, the soul reaches a breaking point. A sacred breaking point. The moment where survival is no longer enough. The moment where your spirit finally says, I cannot continue living disconnected from my truth. That moment changes everything. And perhaps you are standing in that moment right now. Maybe that is why your life feels so different lately. You no longer resonate with the same conversations. You no longer crave the same distractions. You no longer feel emotionally satisfied by surface-level attention. Something inside you has matured spiritually. You can feel it. Even your loneliness feels different now. Before, loneliness made you panic. Now it makes you reflect. Before, silence made you chase. Now silence reveals truth. Before, you feared losing people. Now, you fear losing yourself. That transformation is powerful. Because the moment you stop abandoning yourself for love is the moment divine alignment begins. Accelerating. And this is what many people fail to understand about the twin flame journey. Union is not only about meeting another person. It is about becoming emotionally aligned with the truth of your own soul. That is why healing mattered so much. Not because you needed to become perfect, but because you needed to remember your worth before receiving a connection powerful enough to mirror it back to you completely. Imagine what would happen if your twin flame entered your life before you learned boundaries, before you learned discernment, before you learned emotional self-respect. The connection might have intensified your wounds instead of healing them. That is why the preparation season lasted so long. God was protecting both souls from premature union. And now many of you are entering a completely different energetic phase. The chasing energy is dissolving. The desperation is fading. Your spirit is becoming calmer, more surrendered, more intuitive, more emotionally honest. This is not giving up on love. This is evolving beyond fear. And ironically, that is often when the connection itself begins moving closer physically. Because alignment responds to authenticity. When you stop forcing, manipulating, chasing, and over-controlling outcomes, your energy becomes open enough to receive naturally. That is why surrender matters so deeply on this journey. Surrender does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop trying to control what God is already orchestrating behind the scenes. Some of you can feel this already. You feel like something is about to change. You cannot fully explain it logically, but your spirit senses movement. A door is closing internally. An old cycle is ending emotionally. And even though parts of your future remain uncertain, your intuition keeps whispering the same message. Prepare yourself. That whisper matters. Because your soul recognizes alignment before your physical reality catches up. Think about how much your spirit has survived to reach this moment. The betrayals, the abandonment, the emotional confusion, the sleepless nights, the tears nobody saw, the moments where you questioned whether you were worthy of real love at all. And despite everything, you are still here, still healing, still evolving, still searching for truth instead of settling for illusion. That resilience is sacred, because many people allow pain to harden them permanently. But you kept your heart open even after disappointment. You kept believing even while healing. And that willingness to continue evolving is exactly why your energy has changed so deeply. You are no longer the person who first began this journey. You can feel that clearly now. Your standards changed. Your intuition strengthened. Your self-awareness deepened. Even your relationship with yourself transformed. You stopped needing constant external validation to feel valuable. You stopped chasing temporary emotional highs. You stopped romanticizing relationships that only wounded your spirit. And through that transformation, your soul became more aligned with the love it was truly seeking all along. That is why the signs kept repeating. Not to confuse you, to guide you, to prevent you from settling for a life beneath your spiritual calling. Every repeated number, every dream, every strange coincidence, every emotional awakening, every painful ending, it was all pushing you toward the same truth. Your destiny was never hidden from you. It was preparing you gradually. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all is this. The future you have been sensing emotionally may already be unfolding spiritually. Even now, while you still question the timing sometimes. Even now, while parts of the journey remain unclear. Movement is happening. Healing is happening. Alignment is happening. Not everything sacred happens where the physical eyes can immediately see it. Some miracles begin in silence first. That is why faith matters now more than fear. Trust matters more than obsession. Inner peace matters more than control. Because what is meant for your soul cannot be destroyed by temporary delays. Divine timing may feel slow to the human heart, but it is never late. And if this message found you today, perhaps this is your final confirmation. The signs repeating in your life are not asking you to chase harder. They are asking you to trust deeper. Trust the transformation. Trust the healing. Trust the release. Trust the doors that closed. Trust the intuition that kept warning you not to settle. Trust the strange feeling inside your spirit that keeps telling you your life is about to change. Because it is. And before this message ends, there is something important I want you to do. Do not stay silent this time. Energy responds to declaration. Transformation strengthens when the soul consciously chooses alignment. So if you are truly ready to leave behind the old cycle, if you are ready to stop abandoning yourself emotionally, if you are ready to trust divine timing instead of fear, then I want you to comment, "I accept my divine alignment." Or comment 1111 if the signs have been following you everywhere lately. Let this moment become a spiritual confirmation for your own soul. And if this message spoke directly to your spirit, subscribe and stay connected to this community of chosen ones who are awakening, healing, and preparing for the next chapter together. Because you are not crazy, you are not forgotten, and you are not walking this path alone. The signs keep repeating for one reason. Your twin flame path is no longer far away.